This man showed up at a school bus stop like he belonged there, blending in, acting normal, but the canine dog wouldn't let him take a single step closer, and when police checked his backpack, what they found led to the rescue of two missing girls and the takedown of something far darker. Before we reveal the full story, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. And if you're not already subscribed, hit that button now, because stories like this, they only get wilder from here. It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday morning on a quiet street in Fallow Creek, the kind of place where school buses stopped at the same exact corner every day, and where kids played hopscotch with their backpacks still on. The sun had just crested over the oak trees, casting long shadows across the sidewalk, and Mrs. Bellamy, the crossing guard, waved like she always did from the corner of Maple and Harrison. Sergeant Jonah Reed was parked 30 yards away in his unmarked cruiser, one hand on the steering wheel, the other lazily scratching behind the ear of his partner, a K9 named Vesper. He wasn't supposed to be on that block that morning. Jonah had stopped there because he was early to an appointment and liked the peace. He'd brewed a bad cup of gas station coffee and was waiting for it to cool when Vesper sat up, ears stiff, nose pointed dead ahead. Vesper wasn't your typical patrol dog. She was lean, almost too quiet, with short sable fur and dark eyes that never seemed to blink. A narcotics dropout, too skittish for raids, too hesitant for aggressive pursuit. But she had a nose like you wouldn't believe and a way of picking up things others missed. Across the street, at the bus stop, 7 kids had gathered, backpacks slung low, jackets unzipped, still half asleep. A few parents were chatting near their cars. A teenage boy bounced a basketball, and walking up from the south side of the block was a man, not suspicious on his own. Brown jacket, ball cap, backpack slung over one shoulder, walking with purpose, but Vesper's eyes never left him. "Ves," Jonah murmured. "What do you see?" She gave a sharp puff through her nose and shifted in her seat. The man was still walking, heading straight toward the kids. His pace wasn't quite right, not relaxed, not rushed, something in between. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets. Then, right as he neared the edge of the sidewalk, where the kids waited, Vesper made her move. She launched from the passenger seat, paws skidding slightly as she hit the pavement and cut across the street like a missile. "Ves, hold!" Jonah shouted, already opening his door, but she didn't veer. She didn't lunge. She didn't attack. She just planted herself directly between the man and the children. Head low, shoulders squared, a single growl rumbling from her throat. The man froze. The kids didn't understand at first. One laughed nervously. A little girl stepped back, clutching her lunchbox tighter. Jonah was already across the street, badge out, hand on his hip. "Sir," he said firmly, "need you to stop right there." "I'm just walking," the man said flatly. "Is that dog trained to attack?" "She's trained to alert," Jonah said. "You headed somewhere?" "I'm catching the bus." Jonah frowned. "This stop's for elementary pickup. You don't have a kid here." The man didn't answer. One of the moms stepped forward, concerned, but Jonah kept his focus on the stranger. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some ID." The man hesitated. "I forgot it." Vesper's growl deepened as Jonah reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is 197. I've got a potential 1025, adult male suspicious activity at Harrison and Maple. Requesting backup, K9 alert issued." As soon as the call was made, the man took one step back, and Vesper snapped forward, not to bite, just to push. Her chest hit his shin, her bark sharp, commanding. The man stumbled back and dropped his backpack. That's when the tone changed. The moment the bag hit the ground, Vesper went full alert, barked again, then circled it twice, nose twitching wildly. "Sir, you're being detained," Jonah said firmly. The man turned and ran. Jonah gave chase, through yards, over a low fence, down an alley. Backup arrived 90 seconds later. They caught him 3 blocks away, panting, covered in mud, and in his dropped backpack, tucked behind a false lining, were IDs, photos, duct tape, and a Ziploc bag full of blonde hair. The street went silent. Then the FBI was called, and what came next unraveled a case no one even knew had started. Back at the precinct, the man gave only one name, Trevor Miles. No ID, no phone, no wallet. Just the mud-soaked jeans, the beat-up boots, and that same brown jacket zipped to the throat like he was hiding behind it. He asked for a lawyer, refused to answer questions, didn't even ask why he was there. Vesper sat calmly in the hallway, her head resting on her paws, eyes never leaving the room's door. Jonah leaned on the opposite wall with a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. Detective Clara Anwar stepped out of the room after 20 minutes and pulled the door closed with a sigh. He's stonewalling, won't confirm anything, keeps asking when he can leave. Jonah handed her the report. You saw what was in the bag? Yeah, the IDs looked fake. Hair's human. We're sending it to the lab. 2 hours later, the FBI rolled in. Agent Jerome Latimer was the one who took over. Tall, quiet, mid-50s, with a no-nonsense face and a voice like low thunder. He read the report, asked no questions, and requested to interview Miles himself. Jonah wasn't allowed in the room, but he didn't need to be. Vesper's body language told him enough. When the door clicked shut, she rose slowly and sat up, ears tilted forward. She only did that when she was tracking something she couldn't see. An hour later, Agent Latimer came out with a file tucked under one arm and a stony expression. We need a warrant, he said, and facial recognition pinged him through Europol. 2 matches with moderate confidence. Latimer dropped a file onto the desk. There were 4 photos, all black and white, all blurry, all of young girls, aged roughly 8 to 12, from different states. 3 missing, Latimer said. 4th, still active. Active? Jonah's breath caught. She disappeared 10 days ago from a church parking lot in Kentucky. No witnesses, no license plates, nothing. How does this guy tie in? The hair we found in the bag is consistent with the girl from Kentucky, blonde, age 9. Family confirms she wore a similar backpack the day she vanished. Christ, Jonah muttered. And the IDs? 3 of them were doctored licenses. One was a temporary badge for an interstate truck repair firm, all fabricated. Jonah turned toward the window. The school bus that passed every morning was rolling past again, squealing slightly as it took the bend near the intersection, just like clockwork. You think he was going to grab one of the kids? Clara asked quietly. Latimer nodded. He'd done it before. Probably was planning to do it again. But your dog stopped him. They found the van 3 hours later. It was tucked behind an abandoned warehouse, 2 miles from the school. Low profile, no markings, partially concealed under a broken corrugated canopy. The kind of place you'd only find if you were looking with purpose. The rear doors were sealed with a lock that had been snapped with bolt cutters. Inside, it was worse than anyone wanted to see. A mattress, stained, blankets, rope, duct tape, a pair of worn children's shoes in the far corner, size tiny. And photographs, dozens. Taped along the van's interior walls were Polaroids, some faded, some newer. All of them showed young girls standing or sitting in public spaces, schoolyards, sidewalks, parking lots. Some were playing, some walking alone. None of them seemed to know they were being watched. Jonah stood just inside the threshold, hand clenched at his side. Vesper let out a low, sustained whine. Latimer approached slowly, holding a zip-sealed plastic sleeve. This was wedged under the mattress. Inside it was a drawing, crayon on lined paper, and a girl in a purple dress standing beside what looked like a brown dog. Big ears, smiling face. She must have drawn this, Jonah muttered. We don't know when, Latimer said, but it's not one of the missing girls in our file. That meant there was another one, possibly alive, possibly waiting. They found a notebook under the driver's seat. Just numbers, long strings of them, dates, times, locations. Some matched school schedules, others were harder to decode. But one stood out. 3:20 p.m., Lincoln and Ashbury, Thurs. That was today. And it was less than 2 hours from now. That's the second bus route, Jonah realized. We're dispatching teams, Latimer said, already on the radio. We'll intercept every child pickup along that stretch. I'm taking Vesper to Lincoln and Ashbury? You sure? Jonah looked down at her. She was already standing, tail stiff, nose twitching into the wind. She's never missed. By 3:10 p.m., the neighborhood at Lincoln and Ashbury looked deceptively normal. Jonah parked 2 houses down and stepped out, unclipping Vesper's lead. She didn't move, just sniffed the air. The bus rounded the corner at 3:17 p.m. Jonah watched every person on the street, looked for someone not looking, someone pretending not to notice the yellow hulk of metal and glass that pulled up like clockwork. And there he was, across the street, beside a parked delivery van. Hoodie, slouched stance, pretending to scroll on his phone, but watching the stop out of the corner of his eye. Jonah whispered, "Vesper." She didn't need more. She darted ahead, leash trailing, but not barking, not growling, just direct, surgical. The man turned, startled, eyes went wide, took a single step back. Vesper launched, teeth bared, not to attack, but to block. She skidded to a halt inches from his thigh and barked, deep and sharp, chest deep enough to make your heart skip. He turned to run. Jonah was already sprinting behind her. "Police! On the ground!" The man bolted, but didn't make it far. A second squad car had already rounded the back alley and cut him off. He dropped to his knees, hands up. In his bag they found a wig, candy, a child's book, disposable gloves, and a burner phone filled with texts to a number listed only as D. Latimer arrived minutes later. "We got our second," he said. Jonah didn't smile. "Let's find the first girl." "She's alive," Latimer said softly. "She has to be. You don't carry drawings if you're not planning to keep them." The address came from the suspect's second burner phone. After hours of digital tracing and cross-referencing with the van's GPS pings, the FBI landed on a small, sagging house 30 miles out of town, near an old rural route. No one drove unless they had to. No porch lights, no vehicles outside, just a collapsed mailbox, and a "Beware of Dog" sign so sun-bleached it looked like a joke. They approached the house with SWAT in position. No one answered the door. They breached. The first floor was empty. Musty carpet, dishes in the sink, a couch covered in old blankets that reeked of cigarette smoke and something sourer. Vesper led the way, nose to the floor. She stopped near the fridge. There was a mat beneath it, cheap rubber, patterned with dog paws. She didn't look at the fridge. She looked at the floorboard just behind it. Jonah stepped beside her, crouched, and tapped the edge of the mat with his flashlight. It slid. Beneath it was a seam. Not a full trapdoor, just a loose board, one that didn't match the others. "Here," Jonah said. The SWAT leader brought over a crowbar. The plank lifted with a groan. Dust swirled up like dry breath. There was a staircase, thin, steep, concrete. They descended in a staggered line. The air changed instantly. Wet, cold, metallic. At the bottom was a door. Jonah stepped forward. Vesper pressed to his hip. He knocked. There was no response. Then a sound, small, almost too soft. A cough. He didn't wait. The team moved. The lock broke. The door slammed open. And there in the corner of a low-ceilinged room, no bigger than a storage closet, sat a girl, wrapped in a blanket that barely reached her feet, eyes wide, knees to chest. Her wrists were bound loosely, but she wasn't gagged. The chain on her ankle had enough slack to let her move around, but not out. She blinked at the flashlight beams, didn't speak. Jonah dropped to one knee and spoke gently. "Hey, you're safe now." She didn't flinch, didn't cry. But she did shift her gaze to Vesper and whispered, "That's the one." Jonah blinked. "You know her?" The girl gave the tiniest nod. "I saw her once, at school, before the man picked me up." "Can you tell me your name?" "Alice," she said. "My name's Alice." Vesper stepped forward slowly, then sat. Alice stared at her, then reached out. Her hand trembled, but only for a moment. Then it landed on Vesper's head. The dog didn't move, just leaned in. Back at the command center, Latimer read the reports in silence. They found fingerprints on the chains that matched the arrested man, and another, as yet unidentified, likely D. They were running DNA. Alice was checked by medical staff, malnourished, bruised, but stable. She'd been missing for 17 days. She hadn't spoken much, but when she did, it was always the same. She told me she'd come. Who? The dog, the one I saw the week before. She was barking at the fence and I waved. I thought maybe she could smell him. Jonah sat across from her now, watching her sketch something with the nurse's pencil. Did you ever see him use a name? He asked. She shook her head. No, but I heard him say something on the phone. He called someone and said the second pickup failed. The mutt's getting too smart. Jonah's jaw tensed. He meant Vesper, Alice added. Didn't he? Jonah didn't answer. He didn't need to. 2 hours later, the house was lit up like a crime scene on television. Yellow tape stretched across every tree. The front yard crawling with suits and vests and teams in white gloves. The neighbors watched from porches or car windows, pretending not to. The man they'd arrested, the one who tried to board the school bus, was still in custody. His real name was William J. Creighton. No prior convictions, but a sealed juvenile record, 6 aliases across state lines, and 2 burner phones found on him, each with half a dozen deleted texts that techs were now working to resurrect. One phrase, however, had survived the wipe. It was in a draft folder. D says next drop point needs to be within 24 hours. That implies there was a previous one, Captain Latimer said. There was, said Agent Minerva. 2 girls missing in adjacent counties. Same age bracket, similar profiles. Blonde, preteen, low-income neighborhoods. Van spotted near both disappearances. No plate IDs, but the make and model match what Creighton was driving. Only difference, no one saw a dog until this time. D is real, Alice said from the doorway, flanked by a nurse and 2 officers. I heard them say it. I wasn't supposed to, but I did. Jonah knelt. You shouldn't be walking around right now. She ignored that. He said D doesn't like dogs, said he almost got caught because of one. You remember anything else? Alice frowned. He had a phone, but he didn't talk on it much. He typed a lot. And there was a picture of a road sign, a green one. It had 3 letters, GID. I remember because I thought it was a funny name. Latimer was already scanning a map. Gidney, that's a logging town upstate. Decommissioned routes. No cameras, no cell towers. Jonah stood. That's where D's operating from. The convoy hit the highway by dawn. 3 unmarked SUVs, 2 surveillance vans, 1 trailer with a mobile comms tower strapped to the roof. Jonah sat in the back seat, rubbing Vesper's shoulders in quiet rhythm. She was calm but not sleepy. Her ears twitched at every passing truck. Her eyes watched the exits like they meant something. By the time they hit the turnoff, the GPS went blank. Dirt roads, no signage, just tree-lined silence and frost in the air. At mile marker 112, Vesper stood up, not barked, not growled, just stood. Jonah tapped the driver. Stop here. 100 yards ahead was a clearing, a shack, a pickup, no signs of life. But near the steps, cages. 2 of them, empty. They moved fast. SWAT in formation. Jonah and Vesper off to the left flank, sweeping the perimeter. The door was barricaded from the inside, but there was no one inside. Just cameras, mounted, active. It's remote surveillance. He's watching us, Latimer realized. Then Vesper barked. Twice. Short. Urgent. She sprinted toward the back of the shack, nose down, tail stiff. Jonah followed, breath catching in his throat. Behind the shack was a root cellar. Wooden doors, padlocked. They broke the lock. Inside was nothing but darkness, and a man in dark clothing, hood up, trembling. It wasn't D, but he had a phone. Still warm, unlocked. On the screen, a live feed of a small girl, locked in a room. Her name was Cassie. She'd been missing for 10 days. They had 30 seconds before the feed cut to black. Jonah looked at Vesper. She growled, then turned and ran toward the tree line. He followed, because whatever Dee had planned next, it wasn't over, and Vesper knew where to start. Jonah hadn't seen Vesper move like this since the warehouse sting in Baltimore. Ears pinned flat, legs pumping in perfect coiled rhythm, nose dragging the air like it was a map only she could read. She darted through the pine brush, ignoring branches that scraped her flank. The terrain dipped. An old ATV path snaked through a patch of oaks scattered with tire ruts and beer cans. Vesper slowed briefly, nose pressed to a shallow divot in the dirt, then growled low. She veered left. Ahead stood a barn. Not a farm barn. Something older, industrial, maybe 60 feet long, stone foundation that half sunk into the slope. A rusted sign leaned against the entrance. Municipal salt storage. County debt. The door was broken. Not splintered, not hanging, just broken. Bent inward like something had forced it open, but with too much care to be panicked. Vesper stopped just outside. She waited. Jonah drew his weapon, one step forward, then two. The door creaked as he nudged it open. Inside, the barn smelled of rust, mildew, and something sharp. Not blood. Bleach, recent. There were no overhead lights, but in the ambient gray, he could make out a cot, an overturned chair, and two camera tripods. The walls were lined with blackout tarp. One corner had a steel cabinet, padlocked. Another had duct tape, torn rope, and a folded flannel shirt far too small for an adult. Vesper padded over to the shirt, sniffed it once, then turned her head sharply and growled again. Not at the cot, at the back wall, at a vent, low to the floor, metal grating. The floor around it was disturbed, not like something had gone in, like something had come out. He knelt, gently lifted the grate. Scratch marks, fresh. Jonah's stomach sank. The rear door of the barn had a separate lock, sawn off. He radioed in and followed Vesper through the door, across the frostbitten grass, and up a hill that sloped toward a ridge dotted with hunting blinds. At the top, she froze. One paw lifted. Then she backed off. Jonah crested the hill behind her and saw why. A claymore mine, wired, half-buried, and armed. Vesper had stopped exactly 6 inches before the tripwire. "Your dog just saved your life," Agent Minerva said, after they set up a containment ring. "No," Jonah replied. "She saved a trail." The drone operator spotted heat signatures in the valley. 2, maybe 3. On foot. 1 limping. "That's him," Jonah said. 15-minute lead, Max. They moved quickly but deliberately as they descended into the valley, where mist clung low to the frozen underbrush, and everything smelled like wet pine and rotting bark. 5 minutes later, they crested the last ridge, and there it was. A cabin sat crookedly between 2 sycamores, roof sagging under decades of decay. A generator sputtered behind it, powering a single bulb barely visible through a slit in the boarded window. The man they sought was sitting outside the door, on an old bucket, smoking a cigarette like he had all the time in the world. His leg was bandaged sloppily. Blood soaked through the bottom. "Thomas Weller! Hands where we can see them!" Jonah called out. The man took one final drag of his cigarette, flicked the butt to the ground, and raised both hands. But then, the door behind him opened, and from within, a small pale arm reached out. A girl, no older than 11, emerged halfway, blinking against the light. She wore a hoodie, at least 3 sizes too big, and mismatched shoes. "Go inside," Weller told her, but she didn't. She stayed in the doorway. "Step away from her," Jonah snapped. "Don't tell me what to do," Weller said quietly. "Not now, not after all this." His voice cracked, not from fear, but from some twisted sense of righteousness. The girl behind Weller finally spoke. "He said he was taking me to see my sister." "What's your name?" Jonah asked, soft now. "Marcy." "Where's your sister, Marcy?" The girl's eyes filled. "I don't know." Weller turned. "You were never supposed to hear that." And that's when he reached for his pocket. But Vesper was faster. She lunged with surgical precision, her jaws clamping onto his wrist before his fingers could close around whatever was in that coat. He screamed and dropped to one knee. "Hands behind your back!" Minerva shouted as the team moved in. They secured his arms and retrieved the object from his pocket, a switchblade, locked and loaded. "You're safe now," Minerva told Marcy, who finally took her outstretched hand. Inside the cabin, they found 2 cots, a camping stove, a bag filled with IDs, and a burner phone that pinged 3 other missing persons reports. Thomas Weller had been off the grid for years. He'd worked for a children's nonprofit in New Hampshire until he was quietly dismissed. No charges, no publicity, just a quiet exit. No one connected him to the disappearances. Not until now. And all because Vesper didn't like the way he walked across a sidewalk toward a school bus. They processed the scene, secured Marcy, sent word to her parents, who broke down sobbing over the phone. By the time the sun came up, the cabin was marked off and silent. Jonah sat beside Vesper at the edge of the ridge, watching mist rise off the creek below. "You didn't just stop a crime," he whispered. "You broke open a pattern." Vesper didn't react. She just leaned against his leg. A few minutes later, Marcy came over. She looked down at Vesper. "That's the dog who stopped him?" Jonah nodded. "Her name's Vesper." Marcy knelt and gently reached out. Vesper leaned forward, sniffed her hand, then gave it a slow lick. Marcy smiled. "You're the reason I'm going home." They didn't speak much on the drive back. When they pulled into the precinct's rear gate, Vesper stepped out first, stretching her legs. She didn't bark. She didn't strut. She just shook out her fur and trotted to the rear entrance like any other dog clocking out after a long shift. No one applauded. No cameras, no statue, no mural, no banner saying, "Hero Canine Saves Child." Just a handler who scratched her behind her ears, fed her a strip of jerky from his pocket, and whispered, "You did good today, girl." Inside, reports were filed, interviews recorded, the connections between the girls still being uncovered, the link that started it all, a quiet dog who didn't like the way one man hovered near a school bus. When the brass gathered for the debrief and asked why Jonah delayed protocol for a dog's alert that wasn't trained for narcotics or bomb detection, he simply replied, "She saw something we didn't. I listened." The room went quiet. The next morning, the team was reassigned to a different district for unrelated work. No medals, no special commendations, just a line in the field report that read, "Investigation initiated after K9 exhibited irregular alert behavior at community school crossing. Lead pursued, subject apprehended, 2 missing minors recovered." That was it. And that's all it needed to be. Now let me ask you something. Do you think Vesper truly knew that man was dangerous? Or was it just instinct? Something only a dog could feel before we do? Tell me what you think in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story gripped you even a little, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you never miss another one of these cases. And hey, if someone you know still thinks canines are just barking alarms or oversized pets, send them this video. They might just change their mind. 2 more true-to-life stories are right on your screen. Click on one, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with a brand new one.